Okay, hello, you're live. Um, yeah, this is the kind of video I don't enjoy making as much because I kind of have to read more than I just talk about products or things. And it's not one of my rewrite ones because in this case, we're talking about a movie that hasn't come out yet, based on an older movie, based on a fairy tale, based on whatever. So obviously I'm more familiar with the old movie, but I haven't seen it in decades. I don't even, I mean, I know I saw it at least once since I was 20 or something, but all the way through instead of just the little clips that they show on, a PBS thing or whatever. Um, and this video, though, like I said, I haven't watched the new trailer yet. I was watching the videos from Critical Drinker and then one from Mike Zeroh, and I don't really have necessarily that much to say about the Mike Zeroh video. I just kind of watched it. It wasn't totally clickbaity, but you can watch it for yourself if you're that interested. But there will be some bits from that. But it's kind of like obviously I agree typically with a lot of things that Critical Drinker says. So, I pretty much can trust his reviews to be in line with what I might want to watch, right? So that's kind of a shortcut. It doesn't mean I'm not going to ever see any movies that he lampoons. I might end up seeing some of them. But this is another one that it looks like it's more crap that I won't pay to watch. It might come on cable and I'll end up seeing it eventually, and it won't be edited too badly for television like, certain movies. Because, but I mean, what is my real motivation to want to see this other than to compare it with my memory, and reaffirm how bad I'm sure it will be. What is the motivation again? Gail Gadot is or Gal is the only, actress in recent history I find, mostly attractive in some conventional sense or whatever. She doesn't look like too, fake or whatever. Like she doesn't always necessarily look as beautiful as they say she is, and with her hair covered here, it's less appealing to me. You're just kind of reliant on her eyes and her lips, but whatever. In the trailer, again, I've only seen brief snippets of it cut up for the video. But in his criticism, he said that Snow White, the original film, made Disney Corp what it is. And I would say close, but actually no, because don't forget, Disney already existed before Snow White. Mickey Mouse was a thing, right, for a good 12 years or something before that. Somebody can double check that and tell me if it was 15. I don't remember exactly. Was Steamboat Willie 1921 even? I don't remember. But yeah, Disney was already around. Disney was not making no money. That's how they had the money to make Snow White. But then they became this mega thing, reinterpreting, fairy tales, and a lot of people, including myself, were critical of a lot of those interpretations, even for reasons that's a whole separate discussion we can't even begin to have right now. But so I would say, no, that cartoon made Disney what it was. What Disney is now is completely unrecognizable, even from that, even after their semi-triumphant 90s movies that I thought were still mostly crap. But, they made a ton of money, allowing for the budget for this, shite still now a bit. All these years later, they can still kind of coast on fumes if their projects lose Star Wars and other money. We'll get into that briefly. And of course, he was in several videos now showing, you know, the lead actress and how she's kind of the modern version of a feminist, which is like not necessarily congruous with traditional feminism or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that either. But this is a girl's movie, right? I mean, I saw it as a young man, and it didn't have necessarily the same effect on me as it did on young girls, right? And so in this commercial or interview that she did a few months ago, she says, you know, Prince Charming is terrible kind of vibe, and he's harping on that, you know, and you know, and I would, yeah, I agree, you know, says the single woman who can't figure out, you know, why are there no good men just beating, there's just no good men anymore, you know, beating down their doors. You know, all the men are, you know, and Sexton, if you're not familiar with her, she deconstructed fairy tales back in like the 60s and 70s in her poetry already. So I read all of that decades ago and can't recite it now, but this is not a new trend that's been, you know, all of a sudden introduced. And yet, you know, after, you know, going to college and other things and knowing people in entertainment and whatnot, you know, I almost feel like I know the gal who wrote this movie already, except that in real life, that girl will never write anything that will get greenlit for the screen. You know, as much as they think that they're onto something new and original. And I don't know if he named her as the writer or if it was Mike Zeroh, but, and some of this is slightly out of order, but Greta Gerwig is the actual writer. And in my opinion, she's, you know, worse than most. So I should have known, you know, that it was her, why it was so bad, like something these other women I know or specific women would, you know, would write. Yeah, Greta Gerwig, I think, you know, pretty sure wrote that other crap thing from last summer that made all that money. And then that other mediocre thing from a couple years ago that made money. The redux of another, and both of these were redos of things, you know, kind of from a prior name recognition product artworks. This one and, you know, Women Redux. You know, she doesn't have like these original ideas. She takes somebody else's idea and then makes it into her own new kind of concept based on it, right? It's almost like a Weird Al parody more than a movie. And so, I mean, so we can see just from his clips that it's a crap movie already. The trailer that apparently I didn't watch yet, but already got 5 million thumbs down or whatever, according to his video. Yeah, you know, but a lot of these, you know, the rest of the Hollywood woke, as he, you know, likes to call them, or whatever, writers and producers, they're, you know, finally getting fired, but she is not, because she made tons of movie last year with the mega blockbuster that Warner Brothers wants to, you know, hang their hat and die on that hill with. And his current video is not, for some reason, about how Kathleen Kennedy still hasn't lost her job yet somehow. Although he said it recently, Marvel cleaned house, and apparently, but I'll never give enough of a crap about Marvel movies to, you know, be in their reliable fan base. So you know, I'm not the guy to talk about that. And you know, and there was kind of a comment in I think it was the Mike Zeroh section, where someone was saying this movie is going to give youngsters nightmares. I think it was about the dwarves. So I'll get back to that. But I still have to argue, though, actually, young audiences don't know who Greta Gerwig is, or they don't know about any of this other behind the scenes stuff that we're going to get into about, you know, this actress feeling like Disney violated her contract and this and that and this and that. Like, they don't care about any of that junk. They're going to go and see the movie anyway because it's cartoony. It's Snow White, right? And maybe many of them have never even seen the original, but I can say again, from a young person perspective, that gave most of us nightmares, and some other movies like Sleeping Beauty actually were kind of terrifying if you saw them too young in the theater. But that's kind of a side issue also. But that was even just because of the imagery of, you know, these scary dragons and things. So I'll come back to that, or I won't. Well, I'll come back to the bit in a bit. But I wanted to, but talking about like the kind of modern feminism, it's kind of funny because I just before I came in here, I was seeing the Target ad about the girl who wants to be a Jedi, and it's a funny little bit. But when you watch it, when she says, "I told my mom I want to be a Jedi or whatever, and I want this notebook," and she tries to use the Force to get the notebook, and then she kicks the stand, and the notebook falls in her basket, right? And she goes, "See, aren't I clever, or am I not a Jedi or whatever?" And it's well, actually, no, because first you're displaying desire for material goods or whatever. Second, you have no patience for the skill to come to you. So third, you use this violent reaction to get your way with the notebook on the shelf into your bag. So you're actually a Sith, not a Jedi. So this is kind of the perfect metaphor for, much of this modern feminist film or whatever. And that kind of leads me to what I was about to say with this. The trailer shows apparently, the CGI dwarves, instead of Disney hiring little people, like traditionally in fantasy films like Wizard of Oz and pretty much always since, including, in costume for stuff like Return of the Jedi as Ewoks and such. And it's kind of funny, or we'll misuse the word irony again, the Hollywood actors were still out screaming for their, crap union all spring, worried that the AI is going to take their jobs. But then all of a sudden, it's more politically correct to let, CGI take all those little people jobs just because, Puffer Dinklet head said so. Like, how does this twonk have this much power that they let him run their studio into the ground on the budget and all that. Again, this is in the critical drinker video already, so I'm not going to restate everything he already said. But yeah, it's this kind of double speak that seems to bite them in their own arse until they wonder what went wrong, and their studio heads are finally wondering and firing these people. But I'm less confused about these particulars when it's a project, like I said, that I don't really care about in the first place. Like the CGI is bad because the little people whatever, they can run their studio however they want. Again, it just might not be a movie I would ever pay to see. So it just saves me time when I can see, okay, this looks stupid, and move on to the next one. I mean, like, I sat through all three of the Hobbit things, and there were moments that weren't all awful, and I hadn't read the book in a long time, so some of the scenes being changed and whatnot maybe didn't completely register. So it wasn't like, a lot of it was like, okay, I know that never happened, but other stuff, it was kind of like, either it seemed like it worked or it didn't. It was obviously nowhere near as good as Lord of the Rings. But okay, so so here's the big contention, and the reason I'm kind of making this video, I guess. Now we get to the crux of the thing. Is that in this trailer, he's very offended that Snow White now makes the dwarfs clean their own house, which he finds very offensive for several reasons. Unlike in the original film, where she takes the lead and has furry critters help out because they all love her for whatever reason. And so my take on that was, wouldn't it have been great if the dwarves were hoarders too, on top of that, instead of just being messy? That would have been a fun episode of Buried Alive, and derailed the whole second half of the movie. But the dwarves do their own sweeping twist. I think here makes more sense than the drinker gives it credit for, because modern independent women are just too busy with their careers or something to bother with cooking and cleaning and other mundane things. They can't, like, Prince Charming's never coming, and these dwarves are the best they're ever gonna meet. They can't, they can't be like, what's she gonna cater to these jerks? Like, oh, that would not be her job. It's here we see how Snow White in the current day is more like an unemployed influencer who's content to hang around with ugly guys who know nothing about fashion and things, you know, for some reason. Just, well, she got kicked out of her house because, you know, she was, in real life, she was lazy and weird, right? And mom said, get out. But in this version, mom is evil and whatever. But yeah, Snow White is still a gold digger. I mean, because these little nerds have all these gems, right? And going back to the stepmom, I mean, gemstones are tangible commodity. You know, somehow I don't know how these dwarves are not slave for the queen, and she's just taken the stones for herself or whatever. You know, I mean, she wants beauty more because she already has power and money, so she wants to be more beautiful because she has a daughter who's cute. Supposedly, like, it doesn't really work with the original story as much that I can figure out. But meantime, you know, she's so that she doesn't care about all this extra wealth that's just lying around that these you know, Nimrods are hoarding, you know, to use the word in a polite way instead of the true definition. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how the film plans to navigate this whole story structure compared to the original, but clearly everyone suspects that it will be mostly gibberish, kind of like the Dinklage argument about the little people, you know. So in the other video, I'll just read this. With Disney's Snow White teaser trailer now out to the public after it made its debut at the D23 event, one major development now coming in the wake of the Snow White trailer involves more to do with Gal Gadot as the evil queen and Rachel Zegler in the upcoming woke Snow White film by the Walt Disney Company, and why Bob Iger, I think he misspelled Iger there, I'm not positive, as the Disney CEO has been in a state of panic for oh no, I'm thinking of Eisner, my fault. I'm sorry. Why Bob Iger, as the Disney CEO, has been in a state of panic for Snow White 2025. Much of this has to do with Gal Gadot battling the Disney studio heads, including Bob Iger, after they made some last-minute changes to the film's promotion and press tour. And apparently there was a lengthy bit where Gal Gadot transforms into what he calls the old hag or witch, which might be somebody else's shorthand, I'm not sure. And that got left out in some bit of her singing or whatever that was supposed to be part of this junket. From another side note, again, this could be a whole other discussion. He actually doesn't understand that, you know, the hag is supposed to be the crone, but this was misinterpreted by people going way back when, as my old mythology teacher would explain. Blah, blah, blah. It was more conflation with the witches from the Wizard of Oz that people associated the stepmom as an actual, like, hag, as a witch. That's supposed to be that she turns into a kindly old woman, not a nasty, gnarly old woman. And Disney messed that up. And I think that was one of the probably points that somebody like Anne Sexton would have made years ago. I don't remember. But I doubt that Greta understood that either, because otherwise there wouldn't be a scene where she turns into an old hag that I haven't seen, but apparently should have been in this clips of the press junket that haven't been released. So yeah, so, you know, talk about the movie getting the other movie wrong on top of the movie being wrong, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, I don't think Greta Gerwig is all that smart that people give her credit for. She's blundered her way near the top somehow. And if I had my way, like, yeah. Well, let's just say Little Women was cinematically very beautiful. She went out of her way to get that part mostly right. And other people like Carolina Zabrowska or whatever has commented on how the hair is all wrong and the costumes are passable maybe and that kind of thing. And I don't care about any of that. You know, that's not from a story structure point of view. So other people can argue about all that. But if you have mistakes starting up here, it starts to roll downhill. And by the time you get to the bottom, the movie is not this amazing masterpiece that the Oscars want to tell you it was. Like, no, sorry. And I didn't see the blockbuster from last summer, and I probably never will because it's longer than I'm likely going to sit through. So anyway, so here's some funny comments that I thought were worth reading. And that'll wrap this up. So Alderon Crumbs says, you know, Snow White proclaims or declares, "I don't need a man." And the prince then proclaims, "That's fine. I'm here for your stepmom." Going back to the beginning there. Then the first Duke says, "Face it, the role of the queen should have been played by Rosie O'Donnell if they wanted us to believe Ziegler was the fairest." There you go. And then SB Keel says, "Gal Gadot has been more than tolerant so far because she is a professional, but she won't take Ziegler and Disney's bull anymore. I think Gadot is well in her rights to not do any more press tours or even attend the premieres. And I, for one, think it is a moderate response for the evil insults and lies they have done toward Gadot." Okay. And then this other one, Dio Press Solid. Can't read that. "Gal Gadot should totally disassociate herself as much as possible from this dumpster fire. Cut her losses before Disney and Ziegler thrashes her rep any further." And then Cyril Lim comes in to explain to all these people with one word that sums it all up: contract. So, yeah, exactly. She signed away her thing, and if she feels they are in breach, she will sue them, and you know, we'll see how that plays out. Again, I'm less interested in that gossip kind of side of things because in this channel, we're more focused on actual screenwriting and actual story structure and that kind of thing. And again, how do you start with somebody else's thing and then decide that you just can't be faithful to it for whatever reason and end up with some just hunk of garbage at the end? It's like, no, you had source material. Greta Gerwig had source material. It wasn't like she thought up Snow White out of her head and then they tried to figure out how to make it work. And, you know, this actor wouldn't do this part and this guy wouldn't say that line. And, you know, somewhere along the line, the committee destroyed it. It was like, no, this was you looking at somebody else's thing and saying, I'm just going to do whatever the hell I want, right? And so that's more of a conversation about adaptation that we can have on another day. But then the last one, finally, Worry Too Much says, "That's a pretty shabby looking crew of dwarves," quote, dwarves. "They look like something out of a bad LSD trip that any kid that sees this film will have nightmares afterward." And like I said, a lot of those kids were going to have those nightmares anyway, but for a completely different reason. Because it's kind of the nature of horrific scenes in children's movies, right? So yeah, like I said, this is like the longest I think I've ever talked about a movie that hasn't even come out yet. But like I said, it's definitely a learning tool that we can just based on 7 minutes or less worth of, I think like a lot of the clips were repeated, you know? So 7 minutes worth of clips and a little bit of studio versus actress drama. And as writers, you know, there's a lot we can do here that prevents this here. Like, or well, it's backwards when yeah. Okay, so at the beginning, don't do this stupid crap, and you'll have less of this as the end result. Okay. If that was not the stupidest hand gesture ever, but what am I don't know. I'm trying to improv with a camera that's backwards, so do my best. Okay, so if there's any questions, you can leave them in the comments and see how it goes.